Anthony is a GIS consultant with Golder Associates, urban planning group in Vancouver, Canada. He's focused on measuring the health impacts of built environments and transportation infrastructure, and he's here to tell us about his work.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. I'm here to talk about getting people physically active. So first thing I want you to do, won't make you stand up. Everyone just reach up, do a little stretch, give yourself a hug, and then give someone a high five. So we're sorry. What I wanted to do is show you a bunch of maps that I've made. Some of them were more on my own time. I have a bit of a hobby of a blog called healthycitymaps.blogspot.com. And I'm also on Twitter, so if you see anything you like, feel free to retweet it. And I'm from Vancouver, so I'm going to talk a lot about that city. But the goal of this is to develop something like WalkScore, but more detailed and open source. So I want to give everyone a way of calculating walkability, in North America at least for now. So I'm not quite there yet. This is a work in progress. And in contrast to the work that the last presentation did, that was very well developed and thought through for a client. There's some work that I did for clients, but it's not all about consulting. This is more of a hobby. So this is Vancouver, probably the busiest pedestrian intersection. They close it down every summer, and they have people walking through. They have nice cushions for people to lie down on. And this is the desired outcome of the things I'm talking about. This is the best case scenario. So in my modeling, I hope that that would come up as the most walkable place. So this is the view from my apartment. Basically, City of Vancouver has a little downtown peninsula. I'll show you more maps in a second. And I don't want to just talk about physical activity. I think that active transportation and walkability are really the backbone of the cities of the future, and how we design our cities. That's going to influence the health and well-being of communities and save us a lot of money, make people happier, and make a healthier environment. And a lot of this data is from the City of Vancouver's transportation plan that was just released. It's a 25-year plan. So they have some targets, and just to show you kind of baseline data where we're at, this is the city itself, and there's also a much larger metropolitan region. But basically their goal is to get to 22% of trips by foot, which is pretty ambitious. But this is how I get to work. I walk on the seawall, which is a nice little path along the edge of this ocean. So there's a lot of great infrastructure in place. The city does have a lot going for it. Even if it's raining half of the year, people still don't mind walking or cycling. And then on weekends, if you're doing more leisure trips instead of those utilitarian trips, there's lots of great destinations. The coffee shops, this is a little French cafe at the end of my street. I'm just trying to give you a feel. The farmers markets, basically people can walk, there's great infrastructure in place. We even have like festivals right in the center of the city that they're kind of fun. I think cities should be fun places to go for a walk. So here's my outline. Basic story, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the data I've collected in the city of Vancouver. A lot of it's open data. I love getting anything I can get my hands on and visualizing it. So I, first of all, just wanted to show you a bunch of cool maps. We're at a GIS conference, so I can nerd out a bit. And then I'll show you some specific data on the walkability analysis that I've done. I'm just calling it WalkMap for now. And then I'll do some analysis comparing it to kind of try to validate it a little bit and talk about some other project ideas. So this is the city of Vancouver. I've just put roads on so you can see there's a pretty good grid network. It's a streetcar town. It was developed fairly in modern times. So just like Santa Monica, which had a perfect grid, the city itself is actually quite well designed from a walkability perspective. And that downtown point is where about half the people live and about all the half the jobs are located. This is just to give you a sense of population distribution. Instead of circles, I've used hearts as a cartogram. And this was my Valentine's map. But City of Vancouver is quite large. City of Surrey and Richmond are the two cities below. And then there's several other satellite cities. And everyone commutes downtown This is population distribution, just density. And this is some of our local census data on percentage of trips, in this case cycling. It's basically people who cycle can do about 10 kilometers, but as we all know, walking is much more limited. So the target zone for the walkability stuff is really that downtown peninsula. And hopefully the modeling of the walkability shows that's more walkable. This is income. There's quite a high area of centralized wealth right in the sort of South Vancouver area. And this is Canada's very diverse, so we have lots of different immigrants, and they're clustered in distinct patterns. So when we think about walkability, you also have to think about the culture and the people, and the South Asian community is very centralized in Surrey, and then Eastern Asia, South Asians are more in the South Vancouver area. So just being aware of the different landscapes that we're working within is important, especially for community outreach and consultation efforts. Lastly, there's some elevation data. City is kind of like a big hill. And I just threw this in here because there was a presentation I went to yesterday on park score, which was excellent, and they're doing similar kind of work for parks. This is the same kind of analysis looking at where the people who do not live within a 10-minute walk of a park are. So parks are spread out pretty well in the city. I think we have great access, but there's still quite a few people not living near parks. Finally, crash data. There's a lot of cycling accidents. Again, I just love data, so this is street light. Sorry, there's more than I thought there. At any rate, lighting is important as well. So all these things combine to create the environment that we walk in. And that's kind of where I'm working, so give you a sense of my laboratory. And just to give you a little more context, actually, this is the next step. I actually used to work at UBC, the University of British Columbia, just down the hall from a guy named Larry Frank, who has developed a lot of these types of metrics.
He's written books.
Yeah, he's written books. He's kind of he's not old, so I won't say the grandfather, but he's got a lot going for him. And he's great. He's done a lot of this kind of analysis. He's developed a walkability index. The challenge I have in a consulting setting is I can't get his data. He won't give me all the, it's all academic, so I can't access it in a free way. And similarly, WalkScore, we have bought their data, and it's great. I love Matt. He's a friend, so I'm not trying to knock anything that these guys have done. It's just a matter of I want to make something more accessible. So traditionally, walkability is defined, if kind of big picture, as a walk shed. There's discussion about how far you can really walk. In Canada, I often see 800 meters or a kilometer, which is about half a mile. And there's a big distinction between a crow's fly buffer and a network buffer. So if you follow the road network, you can only access about half the area. And in suburbs, it's much more dramatic, where you can't really walk anywhere in 800 meters. So this is what it looks like on the ground in Vancouver. The bottom left is my house. I have a great network. I can walk every direction, pretty much, and that's Granville Island, one of the big tourist attractions. So again, very well connected and nice pathways. So again, Megan Winter is another person who's done a lot of work on this. She's a good friend, and she did more work on bikes, and I just wanted to show this because I'm in no way trying to say this is unprecedented. A lot of people have developed indexes, and this is just one for cycling that combines multiple attributes, layers them together, and tries to visualize where is walkable, in this case, bikeable. So here's my testing phase. I was at a presentation yesterday, and the Esri guy on spatial intelligence was saying you should follow a 4-step process. Basically, plan, pilot, deploy, and then evaluate. So this was the pilot, if you will. It was actually a project we did for a real estate investment company. I'm not showing the final outputs. These are all testing kind of maps because they paid a lot for them. But the inputs to this data, basically their goal was to figure out where they should buy land because it might be walkable in the future. So WalkScore does a great job of showing what's walkable today. But what they wanted to know is where's the grid network appropriate for walking, but maybe there's a lot of crime in the area, maybe there's no business investment. So they wanted to model what the future could hold, and that was kind of the goal of this. So we used that walk shed. We developed an 800-meter walk shed for these two cities. We looked at the node density, which I'm going to show maps of all these in a second. And then one of the more innovative ones we tested out was something called a squareness index, which literally calculated the angle of the streets and then looked at if that had some relationship to walkability. And they wanted to know about transit because transit drives land lift and the price, they wanted their prices to go up. So distance to future transit was a big factor for them. But I've had my own debates about whether I should look at transit and walkability. It draws walking, but it's not, it's kind of a secondary factor. So I'll talk more about that in a sec. So I use Model Builder, and just to give you a little bit of an insight into how this works, we take these two cities, and then we turn them into raster grid cells. They're 100 meters spacing, so the end result is a value for every single pixel, and that gives us a really nice way of visualizing the end result. And it's got nice, dense data versus walk score, which gives you kind of a general overview of the city. So this gives you that, that little block is very walkable. And this is all online. I just tweeted it, so if you want the slides, they are already online. So I'm going to zoom through a lot of these. And I'm happy to share the model. This is all in Model Builder, so you just give it a shapefile and a road network, and it gives you the output. So road length, this is again just looking at the walk shed and some of the model. It's a little complicated, but it runs in about 10 minutes for each of these things. So overall, you can run the whole thing in about an hour and a half. This was the squareness one, and I just wanted to comment on it for a second. I've never seen this before. My boss, Aaron, is he here? No? Good. Awesome. He came up with it, and it was looking at we basically calculated the road, we buffered the node to a circle, then we cut it into a pie, and then we looked at the standard deviation of the pie slices. So if they're all square, if the network's square, then the pie slices are all square, or sorry, 45 degrees, or 90. But if the road's crooked or three-sided, then it comes up with a non-standard deviation. So kind of a cool trick, and it actually looks a lot like the final index, so worked pretty well. And then distance to transit was just a continuous measure. So we put all that together, came up with this, which was a continuous surface. You can see on the right, Ottawa was more walkable than Edmonton, which is not surprising, and we were happy to see that result. And we did this as one analysis so that we could compare both cities directly. But you have to, in the end, stratify by city, because then you get a true measure. And then we had to figure out a cutoff. So that's the hardest part. Where do you draw the line? What's walkable and what's not? And that's the yellow there. So this was all the pilot. How am I doing for time? About 10 minutes more?
You have six.
Okay, so I got to go quick. So that's kind of the underpinning. Then I redid it, and what we did was we got rid of squareness and distance to transit. The client was happy with that. They took it, they were ecstatic, they bought some land, and hopefully they make lots of money in 20 years, but we won't be around to know, so it's a good market to be in, long-term investments. But then what I did for my own work was add in some additional factors, because I wanted to look at the destinations, like the last presentation talked about. You really need to know where people are going. I wanted to look at infrastructure, so crosswalk density, sidewalks, parks, benches, garbage cans, and thankfully all of that is in OpenStreetMap. So here's the revolution is OpenStreetMap has, in some places, extremely good data on trails, on pathways, and a lot of this like park bench kind of stuff that you can't get in a comprehensive way from any other source. And then I also am very interested in nature and access to park space. So I added in, within that buffer, I calculated the percentage that's green space, and added that into the model because people like to walk near nature. And this is the final map. I have been experimenting with Mapbox, so I just put it up on a simple interactive map for now. If I zoom in a little bit on Vancouver, there's the kind of story. Green is good, red is bad. It's kind of an intuitive color scheme. But what you see here is really precise data. So that little red dot right up there, that's an industrial area. It's train tracks. You cannot walk there. But if you go to WalkScore, it's just all green. So you really need like 100-meter precision to get, like, you don't walk over the fence. So that's kind of the goal. It works. It makes sense to me intuitively. The university up here on the peninsula is a very walkable zone. So I was really happy that it all kind of validated. Finally, there's the map link. Click it if you like online. And then I'll just show you these last few slides very quickly. And this is some more seawall. What I wanted to see is if the urban area of Vancouver was more walkable than the suburbs of Coquitlam. And in the end, what I did was I got a bunch of data from a transit, actually it's called the Sustainable Commuter Challenge. It's an annual event hosted by a nonprofit, and they sign people up, kind of like Bike to Work Week, to basically compete between companies to take walking, cycling, or transit to work. So I got all the data for the origins and destinations, about 6,000 trips, and I visualized that. This was a separate project, but you can see the origins and destinations. And if I put it all together, you get a big picture view. Everyone comes from the suburbs and goes to the city. It's not surprising. But the other thing I could do was analyze those trips and look at the proportion of people who took transit versus walking or driving a car. And then I stratified it by those 5 walkability categories so that you can see in the zones of the city that are not walkable, very few people are walking. Not so surprising. And this is not like peer-reviewed science. This is literally just a simple overlay analysis. But I hope to do more work on this in the future and do more proper validation. But the nice thing that I saw was that in the most walkable areas, which is about 10% of the city's area, there's a huge proportion of people walking. It's almost double the city's goal. So that's where I'm at right now. And then in the future, here's the property values of City of Vancouver, another open data set. I took every single property value, it's about 3 million parcels, and visualized it. So this was one of my other cool maps on my blog. But this is the framework we used for that real estate investment company. And what we wanted to look at was areas that had really good geometry, potentially high crime right now, and areas that are close to areas that are currently walkable. So if you want to buy property, look for those areas that have high crime and are near a walkable area, because walkability tends to expand, and that's kind of the way that we looked at it. So this was a suggested purchase. And then I'll just say 2 last things. In terms of the projects I'd really love to be involved in, I like to connect places that don't have connections. So we did a trail master plan for the city of West Kelowna, which is just in the interior of British Columbia. And we looked at where could we build trails? How do we connect everywhere? And one of the things I proposed, but they didn't have budget for, was to do a pre-post comparison of the walkability. So take the street network as it is today, put in the new connections, and then model what that change would represent. And I think that's a great approach for stakeholder engagement. And do it interactively, like the park square people could do. That was amazing. They literally, you add a new park and then it tells you the change interactively. So that's a new connection. Finally, I've done some work with the local health authority, looking at a survey data set, which basically is trying to understand people's behaviors and chronic disease risk factors. And walking is a huge opportunity to improve population health and well-being. So what the problem we currently see, there's not a lot of people walking in some parts of this city, and then they're not meeting the physical activity guideline, which has huge health costs down the road. So this is final slide. basically, they just put in this new greenway along the sort of richest part of Vancouver, which is hugely controversial, but it's been the most amazing transformation ever. Everyone now bikes on this road that they just closed to traffic, and there's literally crowds of people walking. And it was a simple change. They put in one barrier and then a couple $1 million of infrastructure. So it's really straightforward. You just need political will, and the mayor of Vancouver is extremely supportive of this work. And this is some of the land use suggestions that the city put together. And I won't talk about these due to time, but thank you very much.
Yeah, so one more question.
Just another kind of thing too, I don't know if you thought about it or not, but both for like park support kinds of things, anything where you're looking at sort of those walk proximities are, thinking about those barrier streets, like you mentioned, the sort of industrial area, railroad tracks, but there's also like major arterial roads that
Oh,
people just.
great point. Actually, I totally forgot. I won't go back, but in my model, I actually removed all highways and ramps. So they don't exist in the walkability potential because no one wants to really walk on a highway. So when I take the OpenStreetMap data, I first of all have to add intersection nodes at all because OpenStreetMap doesn't have proper nodes, so you have to fix the topology. And then that's easy, you just add points at every intersection. But then I also just filtered by the category of ramp and highway and took those out. So basically, everything shifted. The highways are not walkable. So I tried to accommodate it, but thank you. And tweet me if you have any other questions. I'll be here all week, so thanks.
Thank you very much.